Hello, hello, and welcome to Ramblings with Rebecca. Today's very exciting topic, diplomacy. Probably most of us have some kind of definition over our heads of what diplomacy is. It's a fairly common international relations word that I would say the average person has come into contact with in some capacity. But diplomacy is potentially the analytical framework that I'm going to start using for my environmental peacebuilding research. So forgive me as I very selfishly use the next week of ramblings to flesh out and throw out some ideas about the intersection between diplomacy and environmental peacebuilding. Okay. So first today, just diplomacy in general. What is it? The word itself comes from a Greek word, which I am not going to try and pronounce, but I will type it in the box below so that you can look at the pretty Greek characters if you'd like to. I should get a Greek guest on the show in order to say these words properly. Anywho, diplomacy comes from a Greek term that means making deals with other countries. So the root of the word itself is very much focused on state actors and the particular negotiations and deals between them. Today the term is used a lot more broadly, but generally the very standard traditional definition is about kind of this practice of negotiations between representatives of states, however those have come to be. There's a lot of different ways that happens. The United Nations is probably the most famous and certainly the biggest of the diplomatic organizations, where representatives from different countries get together and make deals, say things about each other, choose to be friends or not, or what have you. Generally, the term is about international diplomacy, so the conduct, the practice, the carrying out of international relations through professional diplomats who often have had some kind of training in being nice to people, in getting people to give what they want them to give up, in knowing and somehow kind of being authorized by their state to give or get a little bit of stuff, that kind of thing. So there's this formal diplomacy that happens between officially sanctioned representatives of a state. This comes along then with certain diplomatic rights, diplomatic immunity, which can get tied into questions of espionage and spy. So this process of gaining information, we tend to have very negative ideas of spies and espionage. The truth is that friendly states spy on each other, and that's not necessarily always negative or even always not agreed upon. And also, of course, then we can get into diplomatic resolutions of issues through conferences, negotiations, peace mediations, and arbitrations. Right, so there are ways to go about solving a disagreement between state without, going to war, and, whoever wins that war wins the argument. That's diplomacy. The question then becomes, is a war a form of diplomacy? Meh. Depends on how narrowly or not you define the terms. Most people, I would say no, diplomacy and war are two different ways that states go about resolving issues, or, negotiating different kinds of concerns, on the international, stage. But certainly they both, I would say in some ways, lead to the same thing, right? Where it is about figuring out who gets what and where and how. Which is, Lasswell's definition of politics. But I'm now rambling and name dropping, so I apologize. Back to diplomacy. More and more, there's come to be this question of informal diplomacy and public diplomacy. This idea that public attitudes, societal assumptions and perceptions can influence foreign policies and also diplomacy. So I am not an official representative of the United States. The president has not handed me some kind of seal saying, Becca has the authority to do thus and thus in my name, or the name of the U.S., or what have you. But I am in the UK on a quote-unquote ambassadorial program through the Marshall Scholarship. And the UK is quite explicit that the Marshall Scholarship is about forming international relations and strengthening the bond between the two countries. This is a soft kind of public diplomacy. So, am I a diplomat? Again, not formally, but there is some element of diplomacy in the work that I do and my presence here in the UK. So in the next few ramblings, we're going to talk through different kinds of diplomacy, formal, informal, state actor-led, not state actor-led, and figure out whether or not diplomacy can perhaps be helpful in fleshing out what the heck environmental peacebuilding is.